The East Palestine train derailment continues to receive national attention. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine just yesterday calling on Congress to impose stricter regulations on railways. The big question, how is the White House handling this? I'm joined now with United States Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on. Good to be with you.
So you are being called upon to reinstate railway safety regulations from the Obama administration in the aftermath of the East Palestine train derailment. Will you do that?
So the ability to do that was stripped away by Congress. It constrained our flexibility, but that's exactly why I think it is the right conversation to have now, both to make sure that we're making the most of our authorities and potentially expanding them in partnership with Congress. In fact, I spoke to Governor DeWine this morning. I think we both think that it's very important to make sure that we not just understand what happened in this case, but take more steps to make sure it can't happen again. I respect the independent role of the NTSB in assessing what happened, but as we get their report, even their preliminary report, I think that's going to create an opportunity here to look at what we can work with Congress to expand in terms of the ability of my department to take further steps toward rail safety.
Now, you've said you are constrained by law on what you can do because the Trump administration withdrew the braking rule. So does that mean there's nothing you can do to prevent this from happening again?
Well, I think that we need to look at anything and everything that would make a difference here. That includes requirements around braking, requirements around hazardous materials. To be clear, there were a number of rules and restrictions that applied to this because it was the vinyl chloride falls into a category that gets extra attention as hazardous material. But the question, of course, has to be asked, if these rules were in place, how could this have happened anyway? And one of the things that I'm looking to NTSB for are indications of things that would have made a difference, whether we're talking about the braking side, the hazmat side, or anything else that can be toughened or strengthened in order to make sure that we have a higher level of rail safety in this country.
Now, you waited 10 days before addressing the disaster, not tweeting anything until February 14th, when you then touted renewed interest in the administration's rail safety efforts. Do you think that was too little, too late?
Well, let me be clear. US DOT was on the ground within hours. We had Federal Rail Administration and then Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Administration folks in contact, being helpful to NTSB. And that was my primary concern in the first hours of this. In the days that followed, spoke with everybody from rail labor and management to folks involved on the ground. So we were involved in this from the very beginning. Did not make as many public communications, respecting the role of local law enforcement, NTSB, and environmental folks who had the lead on that. And at the same time have been concerned about this throughout, and we'll continue watching and working this issue, especially based on what we learned from NTSB.
Now, the decision to do a controlled burn to release the chemicals was initially deemed the safest way of dealing with the situation, but now there is criticism saying it was really done to get trains rolling again. Where do you come down on this?
That's something that I don't have as much visibility on, because I think that really was a issue that came up between environmental leadership and response on the ground and anybody else who was involved in the first response. But it's one more example of something we need to make sure we look at from the US DOT side to see if there are any authorities that would come into play here to make sure that the first priority is always, always the safety of residents on the ground.
Now, you are the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Transportation at a time when Norfolk Southern admits this was the worst rail disaster in at least 35 years. So when are you planning to go to the site, Mr. Buttigieg, and see things firsthand?
Well, I'm certainly interested in getting to know the residents of East Palestine, the people who have been impacted by this, and making sure that we take the lessons learned from this and fit it into the bigger picture of rail safety. There are approximately 1,000 derailments a year in the United States, some years more than that. And we need to keep pushing until the level is zero, especially the kinds of incidents like you had here. The number of fatalities and the number of injuries on our rails is down compared to what it was a generation ago, but the only number we're going to accept is zero. And any of the sites around the country that have experienced fatalities, injuries, or in this case, environmental problems are a concern for us.
And will you be coming to East Palestine?
I do hope that I'll have a chance to visit. Right now, I respect the independence of the NTSB that is leading the investigation there. But I know that on the environmental side, my colleague Michael Regan is on the ground right now. I know they've been doing a great job with the tools that they have. And I'll be interested to visit the community in the future myself, too.
And there's reports of another train derailment in Michigan, just southwest of Detroit. What do you know about this derailment?
Still waiting for more details to come in around this incident. Again, there are approximately 1,000 to 1,500 derailments a year in the United States, down from what it used to be, but an indication that more work needs to be done to toughen and strengthen rail safety requirements, because the only number that we can feel comfortable with is 0.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, United States Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. Thanks again for being with us.
Thanks for having me on. Take care.